So my name is Sailesh Rao. I'm an executive co-producer of Cowspiracy and What the Health, and another documentary called The Human Experiment. And I'm also working on a documentary called The Compassion Project. I wrote a book called Carbon Yoga, and I'm going to talk about that. And Carbon Yoga is the output of 10 years of research. 10 years of research into what is causing this problem, what is the systemic reason for this problem, which is climate change, and how do we address it. So to me, yoga, you would think yoga is about calisthenics, but yoga has the same root as yoke. So yoga means union, and it's the union of humanity with the rest of the species on earth. It's the union of an individual with the rest of creation. So it is a very spiritual connotation. And I use carbon yoga because the carbon cycle is what we have upset so much, but we have upset a lot of other cycles. But carbon cycle is what's causing climate change. And I started Climate Healers in 2007 with the idea that we should be trying to heal the climate, not just maintain it in an extreme state of disrepair, which is what our leaders are working on. And so to me, I look at root cause, and what is the root cause of this problem, and how do we address the root cause? So you have part of the solution there in the title as well, because I talk about the vegan metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a very nonlinear transformation that a butterfly undergoes. And to me, veganism is the beginning of this metamorphosis. So I want to take you back to 2009, when I took this picture in a sanctuary that's in the Western Ghats of India. So this sanctuary used to be a coffee plantation just 15 years before. And a couple from New Jersey went there. They bought this plantation, tore down all the fences, and just let it go. And the animals came. They dropped the seeds. The birds came, they dropped the seeds. The seeds sprouted. And very soon you had the lushest, greenest forest you could imagine. We were there for 3 days. And at night, you cannot hear each other talk because of the din of the insects and the frogs and all the creatures crying out. So every part of the auditory spectrum was filled with noise. And I asked the owners, how did you get this to happen? And they said, all we had to do was to leave it alone and prevent human beings from coming inside. Yeah. And that to me was a shocker, because I was born in the same region, maybe 200 miles away from here. I was born in this forest. And I said, why don't I belong in this forest? So what is this story that we are telling ourselves, that we as human beings don't belong in ecosystems, we are separate from it? Is that not the same thing as speciesism? Is that not telling us that we are actually superior, we are different from every other species on earth? Every other species just lives and the forest comes back. And we live what we think is our normal life and the forest dies. So there is something wrong with that story. And that's what I set out to find out. How do we tell this story differently so that we do belong exactly as we are? And as part of being exactly who we are going to change. Because we clearly have to change. So that brought me to this metaphor of the caterpillar and the butterfly. Because you see, a caterpillar is a blind consumer. The moment the caterpillar is born, he eats the leaf of the egg that it was on. And then he eats the egg shell. And he eats every leaf he sees, blindly. So this is a mindless consumer. But the caterpillar has a purpose in nature. Even a caterpillar has a purpose in nature. So when the caterpillar is too big for his own skin, he stops. And he thinks and he meditates for a week. And inside you see changes happening. All the excess of the caterpillar becomes food for the new butterfly. And the butterfly cells are born. Initially the caterpillar attacks the cell, the butterfly cells. Says, you don't belong here. But over time the butterfly cells become more and more numerous and they overwhelm the caterpillar's immune system. And they form their own little organs of the butterfly. And when the butterfly emerges, the butterfly is a very discriminating consumer. It's not a mindless consumer. It's a very discriminating consumer. She only sips nectar from flowers. And as she sips nectar from flowers, she pollinates the flowers. And she regenerates life. She undoes the damage she did as a caterpillar. And overall, the caterpillar and butterfly is a net asset to nature. Because nature never tolerates any species that is not an asset to nature. We have never, ever documented a species that killed off all life, which is what we think we are in the process of doing. But I said, no, we are not in the process of doing that. We are actually in the process of metamorphosizing from the caterpillar to the butterfly. So we are in a phase where we are mindless consumers. That is the socioeconomic system that we are in, where consumption is the foundation of the system. Mindless consumption. Google has hired 50,000 people just to persuade us to consume some unnecessary product or the other. Right? So our entire socioeconomic system is built around supplying the consumption of human beings. So how do we go from mindless consumption to mindful compassion, which is what the butterfly is about? How do we go from competition, which is the socioeconomic system of the caterpillar, everything is based on competition. And how do you go from competition to cooperation? So we are looking at a complete system change that has to happen for the caterpillar to become the butterfly. And it's already beginning to happen. So as of 2010, the Hartman Research Group reported that 12% of millennials self-reported to be vegan. They want to be vegan. At least they're saying they want to be vegan. 4% of Gen Xers want to be vegan. They self-report to be vegan. And 1% of the baby boomers self-report to be vegan. So the young generation is leading this transformation. So that was in 2010. And look at the interest in veganism on Google from 2010 to 2016. It has tripled. It has tripled. And it has tripled in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Austria, in all the rich countries of the world. So you know that this is a lasting transformation that is going to happen. It's going to happen, but it frightens the bejesus out of our leaders. Because veganism is fundamentally antithetic to consumption, to consumerism. Vegan consumerism is an oxymoron. Okay? Because we realize over time that every act of consumption hurts some animal somewhere. So we tend to minimize our consumption over time. It happens naturally and so we become consciously simple in our lifestyle. And that frightens these people because their entire system is based on consumption. So this is why Noam Chomsky said, currently what's happening is that at one extreme, we have indigenous total tribal societies trying to stem the race to disaster. At the other extreme, the richest, most powerful societies in world history, like the United States and Canada, are racing full speed ahead to destroy the environment as quickly as possible. And you see this happening. You see this, what's happening in North Dakota. It's an example of this. And you say, why are they doing that? I was at the UN COP21, and I was wearing my vegan t-shirt. inside COP21. And this negotiator from Brazil comes out, and she makes a beeline for me, and she comes and says, nobody wants to talk about what you have on your T-shirt. In fact, they were told, don't mention the C word, consumption. And these are the negotiators. They are the ones who are deciding the fate of the planet. Excuse me, right? And she said she is one of the few vegetarians among all the negotiators. So imagine, like maybe 10 to 20 negotiators per country, 195 countries. Do the math. So it's completely non-representative negotiating body there. Okay? And very few women. It's all men sitting there and negotiating the fate of the world. 2 years ago, one of the negotiators from Philippines said, it feels like we're negotiating who's going to live and who is going to die. But that's exactly what they're doing. That's why they're racing full speed ahead, destroying the environment. Because when you're in a competition, you have winners and losers. And when you're ahead in the competition, you want the competition to end as soon as possible. And that's what's going on. Okay? We have a responsibility as vegans to now show that there is an alternate way to organize human society based on compassion, not consumption, and based on cooperation and not competition. It's our responsibility and our duty to do this. And that's what we are working on. I'll show you data as to why they are so frightened, why the leaders are so frightened and they're continuing to do this. About 10,000 to 100,000 years ago, the total biomass of all wild mammals, all wild animals on Earth, was about 200 million metric tons. That's that one circle. Human beings are like a tiny dot on top of that. In 1970, human beings had reached the same weight as all the wild animals from 10,000 years ago, all put together. One species had the same biomass as all the other species. Wild animals had decreased by about 60%. And our livestock were more than double our weight. In terms of livestock, in terms of just the biomass. And then in 40 years, from 1970 to 2010, we doubled our biomass. So we are now twice as much as all the wild animals from 10,000 years ago, put together. And our livestock is 5 times as much as all the wild animals from 10,000 years ago, put together. Just our livestock. And it's even worse than this because that's just the weight of the livestock. Our livestock is a very unnatural mix of babies, mostly babies. And they're all eating like they're babies. They're growing really fast. So overall, we know that the total consumption of all animals is 5 times the consumption of all human beings put together. But this is actually great news for the butterfly. See, the caterpillar looks at this and says, oh my God, what's going to happen? We're going to have to die. We're all going to die. So let's figure out who's going to die first. So that's where they're at. Okay? They're hoping that a few of them will remain, and whoever is going to remain will be the winners. The rest of us are all going to die off. And they're even talking about just the poor people will die off. And I tell them, no, that's not true. I go to the poor people, I work with the poor people, and I assure you that those poor people are very resilient. They know how to live. They know how to grow their own food. They will survive. It's the rich people who are dependent on corporations and supermarkets to bring them their food. We already see this happening in India. Every time there is a festival like Deepavali, the poor people say, well, we want to use our milk for ourselves because it's a festival. So we want to make our own sweets and eat too. So the rich people don't get enough milk. So the middlemen are sitting there and adulterating the milk. And every year you hear at least 10 or 20 people dying in every city. It's among the rich. Okay? So we are already seeing this happening, and so it's not okay to assume that it's only the poor people who are going to die, and therefore we will survive. But that's where they are at, because they're in this competitive environment. But if I look at it as, what is death to the caterpillar is rebirth for the butterfly. Okay? As a butterfly, I look at this and I say, there is tremendous resources available if we just get rid of the livestock. So many resources. 35% of the land area of the planet is just for grazing livestock. If we just bring back the forests that used to be there in 1800 on that 35% of the land, we can sequester more carbon than we have added to the atmosphere since 1750. We know that. We have a model that shows that. And that's on only 41% of that land. The other 59% were deforested before 1800. We don't have a record of that. But I'm pretty sure that there were forests there as well, that we cut down and turned into grasslands. And if we bring back the forests there, you can sequester a lot more than the 265 gigatons that we calculated. So this is a way for us to transition from the caterpillar to the butterfly, where we transform our system. A socioeconomic system has to be transformed now from consumption to compassion. Instead of always figuring out what is everybody going to consume next, what is the next new product that we have to work on, let's figure out how to bring back the forests that are there, that were there. So let's figure out how to help the animals that are in trouble. We have polluted so much of the ocean. We have polluted so much of the land. There is a lot of cleanup work to be done. So that's why there are 7.4 billion of us, because we have to do this work. Okay? And as we do that, we will have enough resources to keep the wild animals the same and eventually bring them to be at least our own weight. And that, E.O. Wilson said, is sustainable. If we can do that, we will save 85% of all the species on the planet. Only 15% will be extinct. Extinction is happening, okay? So there is no way to stop it. What we have to figure out now is how do we keep the extinction to a point where it reaches another stable state so we can survive as well, so that life can come back. And that's the story. The story of Carbon Yoga is the story of why we did what we did and how are we going to transition to this state. One of the main things we are doing is working with the tribal villages. Remember what Noam Chomsky said? The tribal societies are doing everything they can to stop the destruction. And you see that in the forest. You see the tribal people there who are desperately trying to preserve the forest. And we are giving them this little grate. This little metal grate, they put inside their stove. It cuts down their wood use by 63%. And it reduces the smoke by 89%. And they are so grateful for the smoke, for the less smoke, that they are willing to do anything for you. You tell them to preserve the forest, they will do anything for you, including that. And we have distributed about 2,000 of these in India, and everyone loves it. Because you see, the smoke in the firewood contains chemicals from all our industrial processes. Because the chemicals that we pour into the atmosphere doesn't stay up there, it comes down in the rain. So it's in the water. And the trees are sucking up this water, and they are filtering the water. So they filter out the distilled water through their leaves, and they store all the chemicals in their trunks. And that's now sitting in all the branches. So when they burn the wood, they're actually breathing in a lot of carcinogens from all our industrial processes. And on the average, they're dying 8 years before they should. Think about it, 600 million households burning wood like this throughout the world, and the women are dying 8 years younger. So to me, that's the equivalent of killing 60 million women. So we have a responsibility to change that. So when we give them this, their smoke inhalation goes down by about 90%. So, and they're very happy because they're not suffering so much at the end of their meal. So it costs us about $5, and that's what we are collecting now money for. But that's just the beginning. We have to look at the entire socioeconomic system and how do we transform this. You cannot try to do this from within the system because it's so entrenched. The corporations are so entrenched, the power structure is so entrenched, there is nothing you can do to change it from within. The way you do it is what Buckminster Fuller said. He said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So when we said we are going to do this with compassion as the organizing principle of the new socioeconomic system, the World Council of Religious Leaders said, we want to be in on this. So we have partners, World Council of Religious Leaders, UDP International, which is a boutique architectural design firm in Hong Kong. We've done a lot of sustainable design work. And the University of Iowa, University of Southern California, Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. They've all been working together with us on different aspects of this project. And so this is what I'm going to talk to you about the next 20 minutes. The religious leaders are involved in this, they're interested in this because of all these justice issues. There is intergenerational injustice if we let climate change continue. There is interspecies injustice as we kill them all off. And global north-south injustice. So the religious community has issued declarations on climate change. And every declaration is urging people to do something about this. And finally, last year, the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change came out. This was the first major religion declaration on climate change that explicitly asked people to adopt a vegan diet. Because it's so self-evident if people are just looking at the numbers that you have to do this. And the other thing they said is that each of us as Hindus, we have a duty to do our part in ensuring that we have a functioning, abundant, and bountiful planet. This is not something that we can give up on. As Hindus, we have a responsibility to put our bodies on the line on this issue. So the Sacred Lifeline project, the first project we are planning to do in Crestone, Colorado. Because in Crestone, Colorado, there is a lady called Hannah Strong who got possession of about 20,000 acres of land, and she distributed that land to the different faiths of the world. So overall, she has collected about 25 different faith communities in Crestone. And she's trying to, her idea was to create a small community that's an all faiths community that can preserve the culture of the world. Because she saw what was happening. Her husband is Maurice Strong, a Canadian, who started the UN Environmental Project, UNEP. He was the first head of the UNEP. He was the one who organized the Rio Summit in 1992. So she was very much involved with the environment, and she knew what was happening in the environment. So she created this community. So where there are Tibetan Buddhists, there are Zen Buddhists, there are Hindus, there's a Haidakandi Universal Ashram, there's a Catholic hermitage with the Carmelite nuns, there's an Episcopal church, which is the oldest church in Colorado, there's a Shinto. So you can actually go to these different centers and you start praying as a Shinto if you like. And you see how different people are, different cultures are actually looking at their connection with the earth in different ways. There's the Crestone Baptist Church, and there's a Native American community. For the Native Americans, the Crestone is one of the sacred sites. They consider it, I think, the most peaceful site on earth, because apparently not a single war has been fought there, even among the tribes. So the idea behind this is to have this educational environment where students come from different universities, and they do sustainability projects, and they work on implementing that on this site. And the goal is to create a socioeconomic system that's based on compassion, and that's based on cooperation and not competition. So there'll be none of this private ideas, patenting of ideas and things like that. It's all going to be open source, and it's all going to be, we are going to do it the way the Native Americans were talking about, treating the earth as if we belong to the earth, not the other way around. And with all the revenues we collect from this, we're going to create an Earth Restoration Corps, where we go and buy, just like that lady, that couple did in Western Ghats of India, and created that private sanctuary. We want to create private sanctuaries like that in different parts of the earth, and somehow connect them up to create half the earth returned back to nature. So here are some details about how the different aspects of this project. So it's going to be context sensitive. It's going to be off-grid. It's going to be completely vegan. It's going to have an all-faiths temple on it. It'll have a World Vegan Center there where we do an exhibition on veganism. So I want this to become the place that vegans want to come to. Okay? Something for us, something that becomes our sacred space. Because this is a new development. This is a new movement. This is something new that the world has never seen. Every culture had used animals in one way or the other. The first time, lots of people from around the world are coming together to say we can actually live without abusing animals. So this is something really significant for humanity. So here is the context of the sustainability. The architects who have been working on this are experts at this. So they've looked at the space, they've looked at the surrounding context, and so you have the view of the mountains from this space. You have the view of the sacred White Mountain. Here are the surrounding developments. So you get all kinds of different faith communities there, and so they have created their own way of living, their own architecture as well. So here is the form and function. So there'll be a visitor center, a World Vegan Center, a food distribution center, because this community is going to be centered around food, around the growing and cooking and eating and enjoying of food. And at the same time, we are going to measure our footprint to make sure that we are within the limits of what the planet can support. So that's part of the project that the educational communities are going to be working on. So I call this Ahimsa coin concept, so I have that in the book as well. There's more details in the book. So they did some case studies on other centers. There are no other vegan centers like this, okay? But this was Omega Center in New York, which is kind of similar. It's about spirituality. And here is a concept plan. So you see the entrance is from here, and you have two small parking lots there. This is for the community to park mostly. And there is a place where, so you grow food outdoors. And then there is the visitor center.
How many acres is that?
This is about 60 acres. It's about 60 acres. It's right next to a creek, and there's a green belt around the creek. So this is actually high desert. So there is a lot of vegetation just in the mountains near it, but as soon as it comes down, there's salt in the soil. So there's very little growing there. But we can remedy that.
Goats.
So each living space, you have living spaces and a common kitchen with a greenhouse in between. So as soon as you step out of your living space, you should get into nature in the greenhouse. And then you come together for food.
So is there no plan in here for integrating animal sanctuary?
There is not at the moment, because basically we didn't assume any fencing around this. And when we have domestic animals, that will be the issue. But if we can keep animals inside, of course they're welcome.
Is there a project time frame that you're hoping for at this point?
It's in the concept stage at the moment. I'm just showing you some of the ideas that the architect has come up with. And yeah, we are going to be marketing it and figuring out what kind of interest is there in the community to support this.
For 60 acres, how many people would sustainably be able to live there?
So we are calculating around 200 plus families.
There's a company in Colorado called GrowingSpaces.com. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
Yeah. They grow year-round in these greenhouses in Colorado winters.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So RMI does that as well, Rocky Mountain Institute. Yeah. Here are some more pictures of what it would look like. The entrance plaza. So it's just at the conceptual stage, but I think that as vegans, we have a duty and a responsibility to work on a system like this, so that people are not frightened of us. Because that's what the current system is. They are frightened of us, and that's where the cowspiracy is coming from. Because the cowspiracy is not just among environmental NGOs and healthcare NGOs, it's among everybody. All the elites in the system are frightened of veganism. So you have to show them that there is a way to live like this, there is a way to organize society like this, and it's actually going to be beautiful for all, not just for us. Thank you very much.